Now, my question is regarding ADHD, which is something I haven't heard you speak a whole lot about, maybe a little
I have that.
bit. Now, it seems to me that we, or at least maybe just me, do not quite understand ADHD to what could be its full capacity, maybe.
No.
And because there's
It's because I don't think that people with ADHD know how to express themselves properly because they're annoying and stupid.
many voices saying that it's an overdiagnosed, overblown, small mental variance that's prevalent in boys, or it's just young boys being young boys.
Maybe. I don't know.
And there are some
I
that
wonder.
would
I've heard people say that they don't think it's real before.
fight and advocate for very different treatment in the academic world.
What's interesting is, like, well, I remember I was diagnosed with ADHD, and I do notice that, like, even now I have, like, it's difficult for me to focus, I guess. But I will say that being on medication, like, really messed me up. It actually helped me do really well in school. I was really good in school. I was like a straight A student. But once I came off of it because I felt so, like, repressed on the drug, I went crazy and I dropped out of school. So it didn't really, overall, I guess it could have been better. But at least I'm the profound intellect that you know today, which is Papa Gut.
And I was wondering what your thoughts are on ADHD itself, and on whether you think it's overdiagnosed, and maybe advice for me as someone who has been diagnosed with ADHD on how to overcome it without maybe becoming completely reliant on prescribed medication.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all,
my experience, I just, like, if you can avoid it, I would try to avoid medication. I'm not a big fan of it. I feel like it messed me up a lot.
it's definitely overdiagnosed. Second, it's a very unreliable psychiatric diagnosis. Many psychiatric diagnoses are unreliable, and that's because psychiatric diagnoses aren't precisely scientific categories. They're weird hybrids, right? First of all, psychiatrists aren't scientists, they're engineers. Engineers are trying to do something rather than to describe the objective world, and psychiatrists are trying to make people healthy, whatever that means. It's actually partly ethical. It's very complicated.
Okay.
We don't know how to distinguish it
Yeah, just calm down, bro. Just calm down.
from temperamental variation. So, for example, if you're high in openness and high in extroversion, and low in conscientiousness, low in agreeableness, conscientiousness, and high in neuroticism, you're likely to manifest symptoms of ADHD.
Okay.
It's because you're exploratory, you don't like to sit down, you're full of ideas, your attention scatters across a wide variety of topics, and you're not very stable. Temperamental variation is also much more common among boys.
Okay.
Panksepp showed, same guy, with rats, that if you deprive young rats of rough and tumble play, which is what the young boys are deprived of in school, let's say, that they get hyperactive, and then their prefrontal cortexes don't develop very well because they're not having the right kind of experiences, and that you can treat that quite effectively with psychomotor stimulants like Ritalin. So that's kind of an interesting bit of scientific information that no one pays any attention to.
Wait, so is he saying that the Ritalin can be as substitutes for the roughhousing? And like an actual developmental? Interesting. Okay. It's interesting to me because a lot of this makes a little sense to me, you know? I don't know if I was ever denied of roughhousing as a kid, though. I'm not sure. I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I was in the Boy Scouts. I don't know if I mean, how do you define roughhousing? I don't think you have to, like, beat the shit out of each other for it to be roughhousing. You just have, like, some fun. Maybe you get a little crazy, play paintball or something.
There is also absolutely no evidence whatsoever that long-term use of psychomotor stimulants produces increases in cognitive gain. Zero. And there's plenty of evidence that it's harmful. So
really, there's no evidence that Ritalin works? That can't be true. Really? Because I feel like my ability to focus went up and I did well in school. I guess. I mean, how do you, what does he mean by it doesn't work? Because I'm looking at something, a study says that, shows that stimulants work well on ADHD symptoms for about 80% of people. So, I mean, I guess they work in the way of suppressing the, I guess, problematic or the seemingly problematic behavior. So what is he talking about? Okay. I wonder what he means.
then the second part of that was, what about adjustments for, in the academic world, say, that would be disability adjustments. It's like, that's such a rat's nest that I don't want to even discuss it. I mean, I'll discuss it for like 15 seconds. there is a never-ending multiplication of disabilities. That's what's happening right now. The disability offices in the universities are swamped. Like, I know some people have it rough. Like, believe me, I know that. I seriously know that. I've dealt with extraordinarily damaged people in my life. You're bloody hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't have a serious problem or who doesn't have a serious problem in a close family member. Okay. It's like, where do you draw the line with regards to disabilities? Well, you can't. You can't. They multiply. Just like LGBT identities multiply. Really, technically just like that. Just like intersectionality, categories of oppression multiply. It's inevitable.
It's so funny because he wasn't shitting on LGBTQ people there. He was just talking about it because it makes perfect sense, right? You know, as a society, we identify particular issues when it comes to like any medical diagnosis, and then we satisfy them for the most part. And then you look at something else, and for the most part, a lot of disabilities are like observing a person and a behavior, or observing behaviors over a wide variety of people in a wider society, right? So like, what is ADHD? Like, you can't prove someone has ADHD. You can't do a fucking brain scan on them. But it's like, okay, well, these people, they don't align with like the norm or the way that we want people to interact in society. And so like, we have a societal standard of how schooling works, and then we identify people who don't respond positively to that based on some form of like overt overactivity or lack of ability to pay attention. And then that's now a disability. Right, it's a deviation, or it's somebody who's like different enough. There's enough people who are that different to call it a disease or an illness or a disorder. But it's like based within like our societally constructed way that we operate when it comes to schooling, right? It's interesting because in my experience, like being on medication like helped me focus and pay attention and do really well in school, but it like destroyed my ability to socialize, and it made me really paranoid a lot, and it really fucked me up. And so I remember just coming off of it cold turkey, and I crashed. And I feel like, if anything, like maybe we didn't necessarily need ADHD as a diagnosis. Maybe we did, but like we throw medicine at the problem as a permanent thing, hoping that they'll grow out of it, rather than teaching people to monitor it and deal with it in a way that's constructive. That's the because now I'm not on medication. I've been on medication since I'm 16, and I still have focusing issues, of course. Like, for instance, I'll get lost on my phone sometimes. Put the phone down. You know, pay attention. Try to pay attention to what's going on in class. When I was on the pills too, I would overfocus. There were times where like I was on my Ritalin, and I would count every word that a teacher said. And I couldn't actually do anything. I couldn't actually focus sometimes in school. I would just focus. They would say words, and I would count the letters in the word. It's crazy. I think that's the bigger issue, more than anything else.
The way that you deal with it is you have objective standards. You apply them to everyone. Not because that's fair. It's not fair if your criteria for fairness is that everyone has the same outcome. It's not fair at all. It's not even close to fair. It's just less tyrannical than the alternatives. Now, we don't know that yet because we haven't seen the full range of the tyranny of the alternatives manifest itself, not in our culture, but it certainly did in other cultures. I think it's a bad idea. Now, I don't want to be absolute about that. Like, it's tricky, you know, because if you have a disability that would allow you to do the work in the university and in the workplace with a modification.
What therapy would you use for that? I think that for this, you would need like a special education class. But that's the problem. Is like, do we have the resources? So let's say you need. This is the thing. Okay, so this is probably the ideal way, and this is off the top of my head. You probably have a classroom of people with like ADHD that have specific learning like tactics to help them specifically maybe pay attention or stuff like that. Or maybe you do like one period a day of like learning to focus. You could do something like that. Or you do a classroom. The problem is if you have a whole classroom of people with ADHD, they're gonna be off the fucking walls. I don't know if we have the resources for it. Honestly, we could probably cut some bullshit even in like middle school and high school and do some kind of like therapeutic class that would help people. For me, when I thought a topic was fun and I was engaged and interested, my behaviors tended to change and they would shift. For me, math was fun, so I did really well in math. I didn't do particularly well in English. I had fun problem solving. So you can introduce like some kind of fun class, but then like fun is subjective, of course. And then there's classes that you need like English that I just didn't give a shit about. But you kind of have to force somebody through it. I don't know if there's I mean, in an ideal world, I don't know. I don't know. I think it's really difficult. Cut welfare. Yeah, perfect. That's exactly what we need to do. You know.
Then perhaps the modification could be made. But I think that was done a lot better when that was in the hands of the professors and not in the hands of these crazy bureaucratic structures that have risen up around the disability issue. Like they're one of the 10 things that are going to kill the universities, or maybe have already killed them, possibly. Because they're walking corpses as far as I can tell. Zombies. So, and that might be wrong, but it's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, that's how I felt. That's why I came off my medication. So I don't necessarily disagree with that. It's an interesting perspective. Thank you so much for watching, guys. And another special shout out to all my Patreon and Twitch subs. If you'd like to support this channel further than you already have by just watching the video alone, go down to the links below where you can sub on my Patreon, which will allow you to get your name on this beautiful black wall. Or you can go to the Twitch page and you can actually use a free Amazon Prime sub, if you have Amazon Prime, to subscribe. Thank you very much, guys. Take care.